Nari stood in front of the metal mirror in her small room. She watched her face change in ways that made her stomach feel sick. The biosuit was like liquid metal crawling all over her skin. It moved and shifted until she did not look human anymore. Her dark eyes became bigger and more shiny like glass. Her skin turned pale blue like winter sky. Extra fingers grew from her hands, making them look strange and alien. She had practiced this transformation 1,000 times, but it still felt wrong. It felt like she was dying and becoming someone else at the same time. The scientists on Earth had worked for 20 years to make this technology perfect. They said it was the only way to save humanity from dying out completely. Earth was in trouble. Bad trouble. The planet was getting too hot and there was not enough food for everyone. Millions of people were dying from hunger and terrible weather. The government knew they needed help from the aliens in space, but every time Earth asked to join, the big space government called the Galactic Court. They said no, the aliens thought humans were too violent and stupid. They said humans were like wild animals that could not be trusted with advanced technology. They refused to share their knowledge or help Earth solve its problems. So Earth decided to get what it needed by sending spies instead. Nari was the best spy they had. She had studied for 15 years, learning how to speak 17 different alien languages. She knew everything about dozens of alien species, how they lived, what they ate, how they thought. She could pretend to be almost any kind of alien if the biosuit worked. Right, her mission was simple, but also impossible. She had to pretend to be a worker in the Galactic Court and find out why they really rejected Earth. She had to learn their secrets without getting caught. If they discovered she was human, they would kill her and probably destroy Earth too. The biosuit finished changing her body. Now she looked like Kira 9, a young alien from a planet called Valen. The real Kira 9 had died in an accident 2 years ago, but Nari had studied her life so carefully that she knew everything about her. She knew what foods Kira 9 liked, what friends she had, what dreams she used to have. Sometimes Nari forgot which memories were real and which were fake. Captain Dongwu spoke to her through the secret radio hidden in her ear. He was her boss back on Earth, and he gave her the final instructions for the mission. He reminded her that Earth could not wait much longer for help. The planet might not survive another 100 years without alien technology. Nari packed her few belongings in a small bag. Everything had to look normal for a young alien worker. Nothing could give away that she was really human. She had fake identity papers and a made-up history that would fool the alien computers. She hoped it would be enough. The transport ship was huge and filled with aliens from many different worlds. Nari tried not to stare at them, but it was hard. Some looked like giant insects, others like walking plants. Some had too many arms or eyes in strange places. She had studied pictures of these species, but seeing them in person was different. She found her seat next to a creature that looked like a tree made of crystal. It spoke in musical sounds that her translator device turned into words. The creature was friendly and asked her questions about her home planet. Nari answered carefully using the fake memories. She had learned she had to be perfect because one mistake could ruin everything. The ship jumped through space faster than light. Nari felt sick as reality bent around them. She had never traveled this way before, and her human body did not like it. Even though it was disguised as an alien body, she closed her eyes and tried not to think about how far she was from home. Through the window, she could see stars and planets rushing past in streaks of light. The universe was so big and Earth was so small. She wondered if she would ever see her home again. This mission might be one way only. If she got caught or something went wrong, she would die alone in space, millions of miles from everyone she loved. The other passengers talked about their lives and jobs. Nari listened carefully to learn more about how the Galactic Court really worked. She heard complaints about unfair rules and corruption. She heard fear in their voices when they talked about the government. Some aliens whispered about species that had disappeared completely. After many hours, the ship finally arrived at the Galactic Court station. Nari pressed her face to the window and gasped. The station was like a small moon covered in shiny towers and docking bays. Thousands of ships came and went in perfect patterns. It was the most beautiful and terrifying thing she had ever seen. The station was so big that it had its own weather and gravity. Nari could see cities and forests on its surface. She could see rivers of light that were probably transportation systems. The whole thing spun slowly in space like a giant wheel. As the ship got closer, Nari could see more details. The station was divided into sections for different types of aliens. Some areas had thick atmosphere for water-breathing species, others had low gravity for flying creatures. Some sections glowed with radiation that would kill most life. Nari felt scared and excited at the same time. She was about to enter the heart of galactic civilization. As a spy, her people were counting on her to succeed. If she failed, Earth would remain cut off from the universe, slowly dying while the aliens ignored their suffering. The ship docked with a soft bump and the passengers began to leave. Nari checked her appearance one more time in a small mirror. She looked exactly like an alien worker reporting for her new job. Nobody would suspect that she was really a human spy on the most important mission in Earth history. She picked up her bag and walked toward the exit. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to move normally. She was Kira 9 now, a simple clerk from the Valen system. She had to forget about being human and become someone else completely. The airlock opened and Nari stepped into the Galactic Court station. The air smelled strange and the gravity felt different from Earth. She was surrounded by aliens speaking dozens of languages. The sounds and smells were overwhelming, but she had to stay calm. A security officer scanned her papers with a device that made beeping sounds. Nari held her breath, but the fake documents worked perfectly. The officer waved her through without suspicion. She was inside the most secure place in the galaxy and nobody knew she was. Humanity followed the signs to the housing area where new workers lived. She walked through corridors filled with aliens of every shape and size. Some ignored her, others nodded politely. She tried to look bored and tired like any worker starting a new job. Her room was small but clean with a bed and a desk. She sat down and looked around. This would be her home while she searched for the truth about why Earth was rejected. She had to be patient and careful. One mistake would mean death for her and disaster for her entire species. Through her window she could see the stars. Nari thought about Earth spinning alone in the darkness. She thought about her family and friends who were counting on her. She thought about the millions of people who would die if she failed, but she also felt something else, hope. For the first time in her life, she was not on Earth. She was in space among the stars where humans were supposed to be. She was proof that her species could survive and thrive in the galaxy if given the chance. Nari opened her bag and began to unpack. She had work to do tomorrow and she needed to be ready. The mission was just beginning and she had already made it further than any human before her. Whatever happened next, she would face it as both Kira 9 and Nari. She would find the truth and save her people. The impossible mission had begun. Nari woke up on her first morning in the Galactic Court station feeling like she was in a dream. The artificial sun was rising through the huge windows and the view was incredible. She could see ships flying between the towers like metal birds, and aliens walking on bridges that connected the buildings. Her job assignment came through the computer system. She was going to work in the Department of Planetary Assessment. This was the office that decided which planets could join the galactic community. Nari almost laughed when she read it. She was going to help review the same type of applications that Earth had been sending for decades. The department building was enormous with ceilings so high that clouds formed near the top. Nari took an elevator that moved sideways and up and down at the same time. The technology was amazing, but she had to act like she was used to it. A real alien worker would not be impressed by things she saw every day. Her supervisor was a creature called Counselor Heijin, who was 8 feet tall and looked like a giant made of clear jelly. Heijin communicated by changing colors in their see-through skin. When they were happy, they turned yellow. When they were worried, they turned orange. Nari had studied this species, but seeing it in person was different. Heijin showed Nari to her desk, which was in a room full of other workers. The desk had a computer that could connect to every planet in the galaxy. Nari tried not to show how excited she was. This was exactly what she needed to learn about how the galactic government really worked. Her first task was to review applications from planets that wanted to join the galactic community. Nari read through dozens of files. Each planet had to prove they were peaceful, advanced, and ready to follow galactic law. Most applications were rejected for reasons that seemed unfair to Nari. Planet was rejected because their people were too emotional. Another was rejected because they had too many wars in their history. A third planet was rejected because they were too curious about technology that was supposed to be secret. Nari began to see a pattern. The galactic government did not want planets that might cause trouble during lunch break. Nari explored the station cafeteria. The food was strange but edible. She sat at a table with other workers and listened to their conversations. Everyone complained about their jobs, but they also seemed scared to complain too loudly. She noticed that certain types of aliens had better jobs than others. The tall blue-skinned aliens were always in charge. The small furry aliens were always doing manual labor. The pattern was clear, but nobody talked about it directly. It was like everyone understood the rules, but nobody wanted to say them out loud. Nari also noticed that many aliens seemed afraid. They looked over their shoulders when they talked. They stopped conversations when certain people walked by. They whispered about something called the cleansing, but nobody would explain what it meant. After lunch, Heijin gave Nari a special assignment she was supposed to review. Earth application number 47, the most recent request from her home planet. Nari tried to stay calm as she opened the file, but her heart was beating fast. The Earth application was thick with scientific data, cultural information, and promises of peaceful cooperation. Nari knew every word because she had helped write some of it back when she was training to be a spy. Reading it now while pretending to be an alien felt strange and sad. Heijin's skin turned dark orange as they talked about the Earth file. The counselor said they had been reviewing Earth applications for 20 years and they always recommended approval, but the High Council always said no. Heijin did not understand why, but they suspected there was more to the story. Nari asked careful questions about the review process. Heijin explained that 5 ancient alien species controlled all the important decisions in the galactic government. These species had been in charge for thousands of years, and they did not like change. They were suspicious of any planet that might challenge their authority. The conversation was interrupted when alarms started ringing throughout the building. Nari felt panic rising in her chest as she wondered if she had been discovered. But the emergency was something else entirely. A human ship had entered the star system and was asking for permission to dock. Nari recognized the ship identification code. It was Captain Dongwu, her handler from Earth. He was supposed to wait for her signal before coming to the station. Something must have gone wrong with the mission timeline, or maybe Earth was in more danger than she knew. Heijin's skin turned completely black, which Nari had never seen before. The counselor was terrified, but not of the humans. They were afraid of what the High Council would do when they learned about the human ship. Security teams ran through the hallways, and Nari could hear them talking on their radios. They were preparing to capture or destroy the human ship. The situation was getting worse by the minute. Nari realized she was running out of time. Her mission had been to gather information slowly and carefully over many months, but now she might have only hours or days before something terrible happened to Captain Dongwu and his crew. She spent the rest of the day trying to access more classified files about Earth and other rejected planets. The computer system was protected, but Nari had been trained in hacking. She managed to break through some of the security barriers. What she found made her blood run cold. There were secret files about planets that had been completely destroyed. Their populations had been eliminated, and their worlds had been stripped of resources. The official records claimed these planets had destroyed themselves through war or natural disasters. But the classified files told a different story. The galactic government had been systematically murdering entire species for thousands of years. Any planet that refused to submit to their authority was marked for elimination. The process was called the cleansing, and it was still happening. Nari found Earth name on a list of planets scheduled for the cleansing. The timeline showed that Earth had about 10 years before the galactic military would arrive to destroy all human life. The rejection letters had been a lie designed to keep humans from preparing for the attack. She also found files about other species that had been partially destroyed. Some had survivors who were hiding throughout the galaxy, living in fear and pretending to be something they were not. Nari realized she might not be the only spy in the galactic government. As the workday ended, Nari felt overwhelmed by everything she had learned. Her mission had changed from gathering information to preventing genocide. She had to find a way to warn Earth and maybe save other species that were marked for destruction. Heijin approached her desk as she was preparing to leave. The counselor colors were shifting rapidly between orange and purple, which meant they were very upset. They asked Nari to stay late and help with some urgent paperwork. Nari agreed, but she suspected Heijin had other reasons for wanting to talk privately. The counselor had been acting strange all day, and Nari wondered if they knew more about the human ship than they were saying. As the office emptied out and they were alone, Heijin finally spoke. They said they had been watching Nari since she arrived, and they suspected she was not really from the Valence system. Her behavior was too curious, and her questions were too specific. Nari felt her heart stop, but she tried to stay calm. She asked what Heijin meant, but the counselor just looked at her with their large alien eyes. Then Heijin said something that shocked Nari completely. They said they hoped she was a spy because the galaxy needed someone brave enough to expose the truth about the cleansing. The counselor had been waiting for years for someone to help them fight back against the corrupt system. Nari realized she had found her first ally in the most unlikely place. Her supervisor was not just another government worker. They were a potential rebel who wanted to save their galaxy from the monsters who had been running it for thousands of years. The question now was whether Nari could trust Heijin enough to reveal her true identity, and whether together they could find a way to stop the cleansing before it was too late for Earth and countless other worlds. Nari stared at Heijin for a long moment, trying to decide if this was a trap. The counselor's skin was shifting between blue and green colors that meant hope and fear mixed together. Nari had studied alien body language for years, but she had never seen this exact combination before. Finally, she made a decision that could either save her mission or end it completely. She told Heijin that she was indeed a spy, but not the kind they might expect. She was not working for another alien government. She was working for Earth, for humanity itself. Heijin's skin turned bright white, which meant shock and surprise. The counselor had suspected Nari was hiding something, but they had never imagined she was from one of the planets marked for the cleansing. Nari explained about the biosuit technology and how Earth had developed it to infiltrate the galactic government instead of being angry or afraid. Heijin's skin turned golden yellow, which meant relief and joy. The counselor said they had been hoping for years that someone would come to help expose the truth about the corrupt system. They had been collecting evidence, but they had no way to act on it. Alone, Heijin explained that there were others like them throughout the galactic government. Workers and officials who had grown sick of the lies and the killing. They called themselves the Remnant, and they had been secretly gathering information about the cleansing for decades. The counselor led Nari through hidden passages in the station to a secret meeting place deep in the maintenance sections. The area was filled with pipes and machinery that made noise to cover up conversations. Nari was amazed that such a place existed in the heart of the galactic government. 3 other aliens were waiting for them, and Nari was shocked to learn their stories. Jinwoo was a maintenance worker whose people had been almost completely wiped out. Only a few thousand of his species survived, scattered across the galaxy, hiding their true identity. So Young was a medical officer whose planet had been destroyed by artificial diseases created by the galactic military. The 3rd alien was Taeho, a security guard whose homeworld had been declared uninhabitable after mysterious natural disasters that were actually military attacks. His people now lived on refugee ships, moving constantly to avoid detection. Each member of the Remnant had lost everything to the cleansing, but they had survived by pretending to be something they were not. They had taken new identities and found jobs in the galactic government, hoping to someday get revenge for their murdered families. Together they had collected evidence of crimes that spanned thousands of years. The High Council had been systematically eliminating any species that showed signs of independence or creativity. They wanted a galaxy full of slaves, not partners. Nari learned that the pattern was always the same. First, the High Council would reject a planet applications for membership. Then they would spread rumors about the planet being dangerous or unstable. Finally, they would launch a military attack disguised as natural disasters or civil wars. The evidence was overwhelming, but the Remnant had never been able to act on it. They were too few and too weak to challenge the High Council directly. But Nari's arrival changed everything. She represented a planet that was still alive, still capable of fighting back. Jinwoo showed Nari detailed plans of the station infrastructure. He had been working in maintenance for 20 years and knew every pipe and wire in the massive structure. He explained that the station had weaknesses that could be exploited. If they were brave enough to, Triso Young had access to the medical systems and knew how to create drugs that could incapacitate the High Council members without killing them. She had been preparing for this opportunity for years, developing compounds that would work on the different alien biologiestaho security. Position gave him access to the weapon systems and defense networks. He could disable the station defenses if necessary, but it would have to be done carefully to avoid triggering automatic responses that would kill everyone aboard. Hajin explained that they had one major advantage. The High Council believed they were completely secure in their power. They had ruled for so long that they could not imagine anyone challenging them. This overconfidence might be their weakness, but the remnant also faced terrible risks. If they acted and failed, they would not only die, but their entire species would be marked for immediate elimination. The High Council would interpret any rebellion as proof that the remaining problem species needed to be destroyed. Quicklinari realized that Captain Dongwu's ship was still waiting in the outer system, officially denied permission to dock but not yet attacked. The High Council was probably debating how to handle the situation they might be planning to capture the ship and use it as an excuse to begin Earth cleansing ahead of schedule. She explained to the remnant that time was running out. Earth had sent the ship because they were desperate. The planet was dying and they needed help soon. If the Galactic government destroyed this ship, Earth would know they were under threat and might do something desperate. Group spent hours discussing their options. They could continue their secret resistance, gathering evidence and hoping to gradually expose the truth over many years, but that would mean watching Captain Dongwu and his crew die and probably seeing Earth destroyed within a decade. Or they could act now, using everything they had learned to strike back at the system that had murdered billions of innocent people. The risk was enormous, but the alternative was slow death for everyone they cared about. Jinwu pointed out that they had advantages the High Council did not expect. They knew the station better than anyone. They had access to critical systems. They had evidence that would shock the entire galaxy if it could be broadcast widely. So Young suggested they could create enough chaos to get a message to the human ship while simultaneously transmitting their evidence to every connected world in the galaxy. If they could expose the truth widely enough, it might be impossible for the High Council to cover it up. Taeho worried about the military response. The High Council had vast fleets and armies at their disposal. Even if the remnant succeeded in exposing the truth, they might face immediate retaliation. Heijin reminded everyone that they had already made their choice years ago when they decided to resist the system. They could die as slaves or die as free beings, fighting for justice. The outcome might be the same, but the meaning would be completely different. Nari thought about Earth spinning alone in the darkness. She thought about her family and friends who were counting on her. She thought about the millions of people who would die if the cleansing continued, but she also thought about Jinwu people scattered across the galaxy hiding in fear. She thought about So Young murdered world and Taeho refugees. She thought about all the species that had been eliminated and all the ones that were still marked for death. The decision was not really a choice at all. They had to act. They had to try to save not just Earth, but the entire galaxy from the monsters who had been ruling it for thousands of years. Nari looked at each member of the remnant and saw the same determination in their eyes. They were ready to risk everything for the chance to end the cleansing and build something better. The revolution was about to begin. The remnant spent the next 3 days planning their attack on the galactic government. They met in secret locations throughout the massive station, using maintenance tunnels and abandoned sections that Jinwu knew about. The planning had to be perfect because they would only get one chance. Nari learned that the station was even more complex than she had imagined. It was not just a government building, but a complete world with millions of residents. Most of them were innocent workers who had no idea about the cleansing. The remnant had to be careful not to hurt civilians while targeting the corrupt leaders. Jinwu showed them detailed maps of the power systems and explained how the station stayed operational. The main power core was heavily guarded, but there were secondary systems that could be overloaded to cause selective blackouts. They could shut down the defense systems without killing everyone aboard. So Young had been working on a plan to neutralize the High Council members. During their daily meeting, she had developed a gas that would make them unconscious, but not kill them. The remnant wanted to expose the truth, not commit murder like their enemies. Tejo explained the security systems and how they could be disabled. He had access codes that would shut down alarms and surveillance cameras in key areas, but he warned that they would have only minutes before backup systems activated. Dajin had been studying the communication networks and found a way to broadcast messages to the entire galaxy. The station's central transmitter was powerful enough to reach every connected world simultaneously, but accessing it would require getting past multiple security barriers. Meanwhile, Captain Dongwu's ship was still waiting in the outer system. The High Council had decided to board and inspect it, which everyone knew meant the crew would be captured or killed. The inspection was scheduled for the next day, giving the remnant very little. Timonori realized they needed more help than just the 4 original members. She asked if there were other sympathizers in the government who might join their cause. Heijin explained that there were many people who hated the current system, but most were too afraid to act. However, there were some who might be willing to help if they knew the truth. Jinwoo had contacts among the maintenance workers who had seen suspicious activities over the years. So Young knew medical staff who had been forced to help cover up the results of cleansing operations. That night, the remnant split up to recruit additional allies. It was dangerous because they could not be sure who to trust, but they needed more people to make their plan work. Nari went with Heijin to approach a data analyst named Minho, who had been asking uncomfortable questions about missing planets. His species had been reduced to a few thousand survivors, but he had been told they were the only ones left when Heijin showed him evidence of other survivors. He broke down crying. Jinwoo recruited 2 other maintenance workers who had been suspicious about the strange construction projects they had been ordered to complete. They had built secret prison facilities and weapon storage areas without knowing what they were. For So Young found a nurse named Yoonji, whose job was to examine aliens who claimed to be refugees. The nurse had noticed that many of these refugees had identical injury patterns, suggesting they were survivors of military attacks, not natural disasters. Tejo was the most successful recruiter. He found an entire security team that had been questioning their orders. The team leader was an alien named Wu Jin, whose people had been told their planet was destroyed by a plague, but Wu Jin had always suspected the truth. By the morning of the planned attack, the remnant had grown from 4 members to 15. Each new recruit brought skills and access that would be crucial for the mission, but they also brought risk because the larger the group became, the more likely they were to be discovered. The plan was complex but elegant. They would strike simultaneously at multiple targets throughout the station. Jinwoo team would overload the power systems to disable the defenses. So Young would release knockout gas in the High Council chambers. Tejo would shut down security systems and communications. Meanwhile, Nari and Heijin would access the central computer core and begin broadcasting evidence of the cleansing to the entire galaxy. They had compressed thousands of years of data into a transmission that would take only minutes to send, but would change everything. The timing had to be perfect. The High Council meeting started at noon station time. The inspection of Captain Dongwu's ship was scheduled for 2 hours later. They had to complete their mission and get word to the human ship before the inspection began. As the morning progressed, Nari felt her nerves getting worse. She had trained for dangerous missions, but nothing like this. The fate of her entire species depended on the next few hours. She tried to stay calm, but her hands were shaking. Heijin noticed her nervousness and offered words of encouragement. The counselor reminded her that she had already accomplished more than anyone thought possible. She had infiltrated the galactic government and found allies who had been waiting for years to act. Jinwoo checked his equipment one final time. He had devices that could overload the power grid without causing permanent damage. The goal was to create chaos, not destroy the station. They needed the communication systems to work long enough to send their messages. So Young prepared the gas canisters that would neutralize the High Council. She had tested the mixture on tissue samples from each species represented in the leadership. The gas would work quickly but wear off within a few hours. Tejo coordinated with his security team to make sure they could disable the Right systems at the right time. They had to be careful not to trigger defensive measures that would lock down the entire station at 11:30. The remnant members moved to their positions. Nari and Heijin went to the computer core while the others spread throughout the station. They maintained contact through secure communication devices that Jinwoo had modified to avoid detection. Felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement as she approached the most secure area of the station. She was about to attempt something that would either save billions of lives or get her killed. The weight of responsibility was enormous, but she also felt proud to be fighting. Alongside such brave allies, the computer core was heavily guarded, but Heijin administrative access got them past the first security barriers. They still had to get past armed guards and electronic defenses, but they were committed. Now there was no turning back at. Exactly noon, the attack began across the station power. Systems started failing as Jinwoo team did their work. Lights flickered and alarms began to sound, but the sounds were muffled as So Young Gas began to work on the High Council member security cameras went dark as Tahoe shut down surveillance. Systems communication networks fluctuated as the remnant took control of key transmitter Snori, and Heijin reached the central computer and began the most important data transmission in galactic history. Thousands of years of evidence about the cleansing poured into the network, spreading to every connected world. The revolution had begun, and there was no stopping it now. The moment the power systems began failing throughout the station, Nari knew there was no going back. The lights flickered and emergency alarms started wailing, but she focused on the computer screen in front of her. The data transfer was beginning, and billions of lives depended on it working perfectly. Jin worked frantically to override the security protocols that were trying to block their transmission. The counselor's skin was flashing between red and blue as they fought against the station. Computer systems, their administrative access helped, but the security programs were fighting back through her communication device. Nari could hear Jinwoo reporting from the power distribution center. The maintenance worker and his team had successfully overloaded 3 of the main power grids. The station defenses were shutting down, but backup systems were already starting to activate. So Young voice came through the radio next. The medical officer had released the knockout gas into the High Council chambers, but some of the leaders had protective equipment. The gas was working on most of them, but a few were still conscious and trying to call for help. Tahoe was having mixed success with the security systems. He had disabled the main surveillance network, but secondary cameras were still active. His team was working to shut down the communication jammers that would prevent their message from reaching the rest of the galaxy. The computer screen showed the progress of their data transmission. It was massive, containing evidence of genocide that spanned thousands of years. The files included military orders, communication logs, and detailed records of destroyed planets. The transmission was only 10% complete, but it was already spreading to nearby star systems. Suddenly, the computer core door exploded inward and security forces rushed in. Nari's heart sank as she saw heavily armed guards pointing weapons at her and Heijin, but then she recognized the lead guard. It was Wu Jin, the security team leader who had joined their cause. Wu Jin quickly explained that loyal security forces were trying to retake the computer core, but his team was holding them off. The revolution was spreading throughout the station as more workers learned what was happening. Many were joining the remnant cause, but others were fighting back. The data transmission reached 20% complete, and Nari could see on the monitors that star systems throughout the galaxy were receiving the information. The evidence was being automatically translated into hundreds of languages and broadcast on every available channel. Heijin managed to establish contact with Captain Dongwoo's ship in the outer system. The human captain was shocked to hear from Nari and even more shocked to learn what was happening on the station. She quickly transmitted navigation data and warned him that the High Council had planned to destroy his ship, but Nari also sent something more important. She transmitted copies of all the evidence they had gathered about the cleansing. Captain Dongwoo needed to get this information back to Earth immediately. Humanity had to know the truth about their galactic neighbors. The transmission progress reached 50%, and reports were starting to come in from across the galaxy. Planets that had lived in fear for centuries were erupting in celebration as they learned the truth about the corrupt system. Many were declaring independence from the Galactic Court reported that the power overloads were causing more damage than expected. Some systems were failing completely and parts of the station were losing life support. His team was trying to maintain essential services, but the situation was getting chaotic. So Young had successfully neutralized most of the High Council members. But military forces loyal to the government were mobilizing throughout the station. They were trying to reach the computer core to stop the transmission. The remnant had to hold their position long enough to finish sending the evidence. The computer showed that 70% of the data had been transmitted, but the remaining files were the most important ones. They contained the current hit list of planets marked for destruction and detailed plans for future cleansing operations. Steho burst into the computer core with urgent news. Military ships were approaching the station from several directions. The High Council had managed to get a distress signal through to their fleet commanders. The remnant would soon face a full military assault. Nari realized they were running out of time. The evidence transmission was at 80%, but it might not be enough if the military ships destroyed the station before it could finish. She had to make a choice between completing the mission and saving the lives of her new ally. Jin seemed to read her thoughts. The counselor's skin turned a deep gold color that meant determination and sacrifice. They told Nari that the mission was more important than any of their individual lives. If the truth got out, it would save billions of people across the galaxy. The other remnant members agreed. They had all lost everything to the cleansing, and this was their chance. To make sure it never happened again, they would hold the computer core as long as possible to give the transmission time to finish. At 90% completion, the station shook violently as the first military ships began their attack. The loyal security forces had been reinforced and were fighting their way toward the computer core. Explosions echoed through the corridors as the two sides battled for control. Nari thought about her home planet Earth spinning alone in the darkness. She thought about her family and friends who were counting on her. She thought about Captain Dongwu and his crew who were probably racing toward the hyperspace jump point, but she also thought about Jinwu people scattered across the galaxy hiding. In fear, she thought about So Young murdered world and all the species that had been eliminated. She thought about the future where children of all species could grow up without fear of the cleansing. The transmission reached 95%. And then 98%. The evidence was spreading faster than any military force could stop it. Planets across the galaxy were receiving proof of the systematic genocide that had been hidden for thousands of years. At 99% complete, the military forces broke through the final defenses and stormed into the computer core. Nari saw armed soldiers pointing weapons at her, but she also saw the computer screen showing 100% transmission complete. The truth was out. There was no stopping it now. Every connected world in the galaxy had received the evidence. The age of lies and fear was ending. Nari raised her hands in surrender, but she was smiling. The impossible mission had succeeded. She had infiltrated the galactic government, found allies among the oppressed, and exposed the greatest crime in cosmic history. The soldiers were shouting orders, but Nari could barely hear them over the station communication system. She could hear reports from across the galaxy. Planets were declaring independence. Fleet commanders were refusing orders. Workers were going on strike. The revolution had begun, and it was spreading faster than anyone had imagined. The Galactic Court was falling, and a new age was beginning. Nari had kept her promise to Earth, but she had also helped free the entire galaxy as the soldiers moved to arrest her. Nari felt proud of what she had accomplished. She had come to the station as a spy, but she was leaving as a revolutionary. The mission was complete, and the future was finally bright. The galaxy would never be the same. The revolution that began with Nari transmission spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within hours of the evidence being broadcast, entire star systems were rising up against the corrupt galactic government. The truth about the cleansing had shattered the illusion of peace and order that had hidden genocide for thousands of years. On the court station, the situation was changing rapidly. The military forces that had captured Nari and her allies found themselves surrounded by angry crowds of station workers and residents. People who had lived in fear for generations were finally free to express their rage. The soldiers who had arrested Nari were confused by the chaos around them. Their commanders were receiving conflicting Orders as fleet officers throughout the galaxy began to question their loyalty. Many were refusing to attack the rebelling worlds because they finally understood what they had been supporting Heijin, who had been knocked unconscious during the final assault, woke up to find the station in complete upheaval. The counselor's skin was cycling through colors rapidly as they tried to process what was happening. The evidence transmission had worked better than anyone had dared to hope. Jinwoo and his maintenance team had managed to restore power to essential systems, but they were no longer hiding their activities. They were openly helping coordinate the revolution using their knowledge of the station infrastructure to support the rebel. So Young had been treating injured people from both sides of the conflict, but she was also analyzing the High Council members who had been captured alive. The medical officer wanted to make sure they would be healthy enough to stand trial for their crimes. Taeho and his security team had taken control of the station detention facilities and were releasing political prisoners who had been held in secret for years. Some of these prisoners were members of species that were supposedly extinct. Their survival was proof that the cleansing had not been as complete as the High Council claimed. The most shocking discovery came when the rebels gained access to the hidden sections of the station. They found entire communities of survivors from destroyed worlds living in secret compartments throughout the massive structure. The genocide had been hidden not just from the galaxy, but from most of the station residents. Nari was amazed to learn that thousands of aliens from supposedly extinct species had been living and working on the station under false identities. The High Council had kept some survivors as slaves and servants, hiding them in plain sight. Captain Dongwoo's ship had successfully escaped the system and was racing back to Earth with copies of all the evidence. The human captain had also established contact with rebel fleets from other systems. Earth would not be facing the galactic crisis alone. The communication networks were buzzing with reports from across the galaxy. Planets that had been denied membership in the galactic community were forming their own alliances. Species that had been forced into slavery were declaring independence. Military commanders were abandoning their posts rather than continue supporting the corrupt system. The 5 ancient species that had controlled the High Council for thousands of years were finding their vast empire crumbling around them. Their fleets were deserting their colonies, were rebelling, and their authority was being questioned everywhere. But the revolution was not without problems. The collapse of the galactic government was creating chaos in many systems. Some planets were fighting each other over old disputes, others were struggling to maintain basic services without the centralized support they had depended on. Ari realized that destroying the corrupt system was only the first step. Building something better would be much harder. The galaxy needed new institutions based on cooperation rather than domination. It needed leaders who represented all species, not just the powerful ones. A provisional government began forming on the station with representatives from many of the rebel groups. Heijin was chosen as one of the interim leaders because of their role in exposing the truth. The new government first act was to officially abolish the cleansing and declare amnesty for all survivors. The rebels also sent a formal invitation to Earth asking humanity to join the new galactic community as full equals. The invitation acknowledged that humans had been unfairly targeted for elimination and apologized for the centuries of rejection and hostility. Nari was offered a position in the new government as an ambassador from Earth, but she declined. She wanted to return home to help her people prepare for their new role in galactic affairs. Earth needed to know what they were joining and how they could contribute to building a better future. The biosuit that had disguised her as an alien finally failed completely after weeks of constant use. Nari human features returned as she prepared to leave the station. She was proud to show her true face to the friends she had made among the stars. The journey back to Earth would take several weeks. But Nari was not traveling alone. Heijin and several other remnant members had volunteered to come as ambassadors to help establish diplomatic relations. The galaxy was eager to welcome humanity as partners rather than victims. As their ship jumped into hyperspace, Nari looked back at the court station one last time. The massive structure was being transformed from a symbol of oppression into a center of cooperation. Representatives from hundreds of worlds were arriving to help build the new galactic government. The age of the cleansing was over. The age of fear and lies had ended. The galaxy was awakening to a new era of freedom and cooperation. Nari had completed her mission, but she had also helped begin something much greater. Earth would no longer be alone in the universe. Humanity would take its place among the stars as equals, sharing knowledge and resources with species from across the galaxy. The future that had seemed impossible just weeks ago was now becoming reality. The revolution had succeeded beyond anyone's dreams. The galaxy was free, and the real work of building a better future could finally begin. Nari had entered the Galactic Court as a spy, but she was returning to Earth as a liberator. The stars were finally shining with hope instead of fear, and the universe was vast enough for everyone to find their place in it. The age of freedom had begun, and nothing would ever be the same.